Well, let's bring in right now White House Communication Director Ben LaBolt, and I'm going to ask Ben, where are the signs? Where are the signs? Now, this has obviously been, and I know you work in the White House and you don't work on the campaign, so we're not going to ask you about campaign strategy. But I think we can ask you about the things that Joe Biden has done and the fact that a lot of Americans, Charlotte's reported this week, that just aren't aware of all the legislation that's passed, all the bills that have been signed into law, and all the lives that are going to be impacted by it.
Well, in terms of the signs, Joe, I can tell you that if you were with us in Chandler, Arizona this week, you would have seen a big sign saying that a semiconductor factory is being built as a result of the president's CHIPS and Science law. And if you look at infrastructure projects, the 40,000 that are being built across the country right now as a result of the law that the president passed, there's big signs saying that the president's dollars that he got through Congress are the reason these things passed. Look, we have a huge communications opportunity after the president's State of the Union address. He talked about the record, the 15 million jobs created, more than any other president. Inflation coming down by 2/3 over the past year. 16 million new small businesses created across the country, the most ever. He's hitting the road
Ben,
to talk
how
about
frustrating is it? How frustrating is it for you? We'll just say for you personally, that you've got these numbers. I mean, you've got and the numbers are extraordinary if you compare them not only to our allies in Europe, but people who consider themselves to be our enemies in Beijing and Moscow. The numbers are over the top great compared to most other countries across the world.
There's no doubt that here in the United States, we've seen the strongest economic recovery of anywhere on the planet, and certainly one of the fastest coming out of what could have been a very significant, very long-term recession if the president didn't make the policy decisions that he did, passing things like the American Rescue Plan. Look, we've come out of a difficult time, a pandemic, a global supply chain crisis. The president put in motion this recovery. But I heard you all talking about the Obama-Biden reelect in 2012. And comparisons to that. Well, I was the press secretary for that effort. I was sitting in Chicago, and the moment we're at right now reminds me of that moment where you spend a year reconnecting with your supporters across the country, and then starting with the State of the Union address, you have the chance to go make your case to the country. And the average person across the country in 2020, for persuadable voters, the #1 television show that they watched was The Bachelor, right? People are busy in their lives. They're not watching the news throughout the day.
Right.
And so we have to be creative about how we reach people.
Right. So you got
other than Morning Joe,
The Bachelor, and then every NFL game, right?
Yeah, I think you're at about 300 million households from the last numbers that I saw. The president's taking his case on the road. Just in the past 2 weeks, he's been to Arizona and Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia and New Hampshire and Nevada and Texas. And he's making his case about his record, what he's done, his plan for the future, lowering the cost of housing, for example, building these semiconductor plants. And he's in big settings and small settings, sitting down with a family in Saginaw, Michigan, talking about their daily lives. And look, it's going to be a big year. No one here, no one at the campaign takes anything for granted. The president is certainly doing multiple events a day, talking to key constituencies. He's calling into Black radio multiple times a week. This week, he called into Spanish radio. He sat down with the largest Spanish-speaking television network. So that's the pace at which he's attacking these things.
And speaking of 2012, I do remember, I mean, we look back on 2012. I look back on 2012 and see how, the story that was written that Romney was basically disqualified by May, that the Obama administration did such a good job there. But I remember Cleveland, the meltdown after the Cleveland debate. It was over. Romney was going to win. I remember the Gallup poll that came out before the election that Romney had an 11-point lead. I remember the Romneys late into the night knowing they were going to win, not believing what they were seeing on the screen. I remember Karl Rove, a guy who knows a thing or two about politics, going, these numbers just aren't right. I mean, even on election night, people were saying Obama was going to lose that race on it, and you got a majority. So, yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, Ben, a question for you. Anand Giridharadas here. At my newsletter with The Ink, we've been focusing on the role of emotion in this election, and it's clearly a a fraught moment in the life of the country. One of the asymmetries I'm curious to ask you about, the right is incredibly good at making people feel things around often very bogus things, right? I mean, something like critical race theory, can be ginned up in a way where it is on the lips of tens of millions of people who don't know what it is and are not actually affected by it, but feel something about it, have strong feelings.
What about those high school trans athletes that are coming to,
right?
to
issue
eat,
after
eat your
issue,
children?
Right?
Yeah,
these are things, places far away from the border are made to feel an anxiety that is not rooted in reality. So I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm curious, it is a tougher challenge to make people feel things, not just know things, right? But feel things around worthy, actual things like semiconductor plants or infrastructure. Can you talk about that asymmetry and if you think there's an opportunity for Democrats to do better at not just telling people important, smart policy things, but making them feel stuff?
Well, I think one thing the president is doing is talking about the importance of preserving our democracy and the fact that there are more threats to it right now and more threats to national unity than there have been at any time since the Civil War. I mean, how you just talked about it, you talked about the fact that MAGA Republicans really make their case based on fear and foils, whether it's the foil of the immigrant, whether the former president calls Mexicans murderers and rapists or talks about poisoning the blood of our country. One of the reasons it's so important that we have President Biden is that he's never going to do that. He's going to make the case to our better angels. And I think there are a lot of people out there across the country, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or independents, who care about preserving our democracy, care about preserving our institutions, our alliances, like the NATO alliance. All of those things are at risk right now because of the drift of the Republican Party since former President Trump was in office, and the president is really a bulwark to defend that democracy and defend those institutions. And so emotion certainly plays a role here, and we've got to communicate an environment that recognizes that some of these tropes and foils, do scare people.
All right, White House Communications Director Ben LaBolt, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. And I love that you painted a sign, planted it in Arizona, and you're getting the message out. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.